Welcome back to KCRC. My name is David. Let's talk Kyosho Legendary Series. Hey there, how's it going? This is David back for another KCRC video. Once again, in front of the camera. I was going to do a running video featuring these, but it rained all night. The grass is soaking wet, so I figured, well, I'm here, I might as well do something. And so you get to look at my face again. If you're interested in any of these buggies, stick around, stay tuned, and I'll tell you what I think of them, similarities, differences, and all that good stuff. So without further ado, and to avoid me waffling on for hours, let's get straight into it. So what you're looking at here is the Kyosho Legendary Series re-releases. These are all re-release cars. The original came out in 1982. This is a Scorpion from 1982, originally released. This is the Turbo Scorpion, originally released in 1982. This is the Tomahawk, released in 1983. And this is the Ultima, released in 1987. What do I think to them? In a word, awesome. They are probably, yeah, I can say these are probably my favorite RC cars. The Javelin, the Javelin. Well, I have too many favorites, but these are up there. Now, back in the day, I had no experience with any of these. And the Scorpions and the Tomahawk were a little bit before my time. I was into RC, but I wasn't heavily into RC at the point where these were kind of like all the rage. When I started racing at my local circuit, it was all Optima mids, variants thereof, and of course the Ultima series. So I didn't really have any experience of these until I built my first one, the Turbo Scorpion, about a year and a half ago. Since then, I've built 4. I do have the Beetle, which is basically a variant of the Scorpion. I haven't built it yet. I will get around to it as soon as I can. So, what do I think? Well, let's start with similarities. And what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to talk about these 3 first, because the Ultima, being somewhat more modern design, is very different to these 3. So, similarities. All of these 3 use a aluminium ladder frame. The suspension and the rear gearbox mounts on the back with a 2 aluminium plates in a kind of sandwich. They use old style, I guess you would call it. Sometimes I get terminology wrong. I guess you would call this trailing arm suspension, front and rear. Design is very simple. The Scorpion variants both use a plastic bathtub electronics box that kind of slots in between the chassis rails, and on top of that you have a polycarbonate body with integrated roll cage. And one thing I really do like about this design is once the body's on, you've got a very tight seal around the electronics, so you rarely do get any water or any dirt getting into the electronics box. Because these use a plastic bathtub, the battery is inserted from underneath, kind of like old Tamiya, you know, frog, that kind of stuff. It mounts longitudinally between the chassis rails. So, now the differences. At first glance, these look very similar. Slightly different body, addition of roll hoops, and of course the obvious thing, larger wheels and tires. But in actual fact, there are a lot of subtle differences that you don't really notice on camera. It's not until you build them or have them side by side that you can appreciate. So first difference, I'm trying to balance these. The tread on this Turbo Scorpion is wider than both the Tomahawk and the regular Scorpion. Basically, Kyosho fit a longer front bar that the suspension pivots around, and the result is that the wheels get pushed out, so you've got considerably wider track, on the front wheels. Next difference, again, not balance. I don't know if you can see that. The Turbo Scorpion has slightly larger wheelbase. The plates at the rear the rear gearbox and the suspension mount to are slightly longer on the Turbo Scorpion. So the result is that you going from the Scorpion to the Turbo Scorpion, you've got a car that's got slightly different design, larger wheels and tires, longer wheelbase, wider track, larger bore shocks with, I'm pretty sure the stroke is longer too, longer front suspension uprights, and another difference that you won't notice on camera, both the Scorpion and the Tomahawk use friction fitting for the rear wheels. There's no hex, it's just friction, whereas the Turbo Scorpion uses more traditional, more common hex design. So those are the main differences between these two. The timeline for Kyosho's timeline for Kyosho's two-wheel drive buggies, in retrospect, to me seems a little bit strange. And the reason I say that is because they started off in '82 with the with Scorpion, and then the same year they released the Turbo Scorpion, and so to make it a turbo, as they call it, they basically made it wider, longer, bigger wheels and tires, beefier suspension, etc. And then a year later they released the Tomahawk, which according to Kyosho is the race-orientated version. But then when they released it, they kind of did away with all the kind of, I guess what you would call upgrades that they'd done to the Turbo Scorpion, and basically reverted to a Scorpion. So this has the narrower front bar, so it has the same track as the Scorpion. It has smaller shocks, the same that were fitted to the Scorpion. Incidentally, I should mention this Scorpion has upgraded shocks, as does the Ultima. So they did away with those, and then they did away with the hex and returned to friction fittings for the rear. I guess it was all in an effort to save weight, because they did make another significant change, and that's the biggest difference between these three. They did away with the plastic bathtub chassis, and instead you have a small lower servo mount, which on the rear really is aluminium, and then you have an upper deck where the driver figure and your electronics hide. So no more bathtub. And then the other big difference, the battery mounts transverse towards the rear of the car, whereas the battery on these, I guess you'd call it longitudinal, along the center. So the result is that in a lot of ways these two are more similar than these two, or these two. I guess, I don't know, I don't have scales to tell, but I guess this is a little bit lighter. Not noticeably so though, but that's what they did. It must have just, the only thing I can think of is why they would do these things, you know, get rid of the plastic bathtub, is just to save weight. In terms of running, it does mean that these two are much more suited to running in dusty or dirty environments or wet environments because of the inherent weather sealing from the bathtub and the polycarbonate body. This is just completely open underneath, so everything gets everywhere. Cleaning is much more of a chore. So that's the three earlier variants, H2, H2, H3. 4-year gap, and then we have the Ultima, which is a much more modern design compared to the Turbo Scorpion, the Scorpion, and the Tomahawk. Gone is the ladder frame chassis, and instead you have a aluminium space frame and then an upper deck. A lot of the metal parts that featured on these have been replaced with plastic. Another major change, as you can see, gone is the trailing arm suspension. Now it is wishbones front and rear. Definitely feel that Kyosho wanted to try and make a buggy as light as possible. The body is tiny. I mean, there's not a lot to the body at all. The battery mounts in a similar fashion to the Tomahawk, and in every way basically this car is designed to be as light, as nimble as possible. Okay, so that's the buggies. Which one do I like the most? Which one do I recommend? if you've never built a Kyosho Legendary Series buggy before, and you're coming from a background like I did of Tamiya, any one of these would be on my recommended list, just because they're so different to Tamiya's, I feel anyway. The build is really enjoyable. These two are better at running, I think, just because of the better weather sealing. The Tomahawk, driving it is, it's kind of strange. The Tomahawk it's a blast of a blast to drive, but there's something about the way the Tomahawk drives, especially if you've driven a Tomahawk, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's the front wheels, the steering element is insane. It's just a lovely handling buggy. If you've not built any of these before, then definitely either the Scorpion, Turbo Scorpion, Tomahawk, or the Beetle would be on my recommended list. If you are wanting a Kyosho that has got really good performance and you don't mind something that is more modern in design, and then the Ultima is probably the better choice. It's certainly the most capable handling buggy, I feel anyway, which is why this one actually has a 15-turn motor in it, whereas these are just using the Le Mans 490. I run brushless in all. I run brush motors in all of my buggies. I try to keep them period correct if I can, and also just because I don't use LiPo, I stick with nickel metal hydride. So, well, that's it. Thanks for stopping by. I'll catch you in the next one. This is David signing out.